All right, voice of God there. Okay, come on in, grab a seat, get comfortable. It's great to see so many faces here. My name is Pastor James Ferber. I'm one of the associate pastors here. I oversee youth and young adults. And first of all, welcome. There's some faces I don't recognize, so we're really glad to see you here. No, I know your face. Just to give you some directions, if you are new here, through those doors and then down the hall on your right, the washrooms are there. There are some refreshments out. If you want to grab a drink, there's some decaf coffee, there's water. They are handing out some snacks at the door, just so that hopefully you feel at home here. So tonight is a special night. We do have Richard with us, and Richard Fangrad, and he has spoken here before. I think it was 3 years ago. Was it 4 now? It was 4 years ago, and that was a really great night. So Richard is the CEO of Creation Ministries International in Canada, right? Creation Ministries International in Canada. And actually, I guess it was 1994-ish when you started to speak on creation. Okay, so that was around the time, shortly after that, he was my youth sponsor. So, and then I remember him speaking on that sometimes at youth, and I always enjoyed that. And then I think you guys started out of your house, right? In 1998, you were the head office. And things have grown since then, and they do a great job. And Richard's a fabulous speaker, and we're excited to have him with us. I found out Richard has 5 kids, the same as I do, but his kids are a bit older, so his oldest is 19 now, so he's got an adult in his home. And Richard, some interesting stats. You've skydived how many times? 8 times. And you've hang glided over 300? Almost 300. So he does enjoy adventure. Has anyone here hang glided? You are the only one here who has. Has anyone here skydived? Oh, a couple brave souls here. Wonderful. Okay. So you have that in common with him. So tonight he's going to talk to us about creation, and really take a look at the Bible and look at why we can have such confidence in creation. Now, just before we get started, too, I want to remind everyone that we often can have very different views on how God created. And I just want to remind you, too, that the important thing is we believe that God created everything. But Richard's going to push us a little bit deeper, and he's going to try and show us what he believes and what they believe the Bible shows us is clearly laid out in how the creation happened. And at the end, if there's any questions you have for him, feel free to ask them. Now, the cool thing is, in a night like this, it's not just Richard coming and giving us information, which he will do. He has an excellent presentation. But he wants to dialogue with us, too. So if he says something during it and you go, I don't know about that, or I have a question about that, or what did he mean by that? You get a chance at the end to ask him. Or if you have a question that's been burning on your mind that you can't find an answer to, I don't have to answer it. Richard gets to answer it. So this is your chance to ask those hard questions. So we're excited to have him with us. And let me just open in a word of prayer, and then I'm going to invite him up here. Lord, we just thank you for your awesomeness, for the fact that you are our creator, and you created everything. You created us, and you created us with a soul and a mind, and you created us in your image, and that's such a blessing, such an incredible thing. And so we just praise you. We just praise the fact that you've left us your word to guide us, and we just pray that as Richard dives into that and shows us things out of your word about creation and why we can believe in it, and looks at the different worldviews, we just pray that it'll be enlightening to us, that we'll learn something new, that we'll be able to have a more secure faith in you than ever before. And I pray you to give him the words to speak, and just to allow this to be an enjoyable time as we dialogue together. So we just give you this time in your name. Amen. Richard, why don't you come on up?
Thank you very much. All right. How are we doing here? Check, testing. There we go. All right. So it's always nice when people clap before I start. Now it doesn't matter what I say, right? No, we'll have a great time here. And yes, there is a question time at the end. So if you have any, some of you have already told me that you're going to ask questions at the end, and you didn't tell me the question beforehand. You're going to surprise me with that. That's fine. We'll have a question time at the end. And if in this next, what I want to do in this, the main session here, is sort of lay out the basics for creation. We'll talk a little bit about science and faith and how those things fit together in a Christian world and life view. But and the hang gliding and skydiving, that was a long time ago. I'm married now. I'm a good little boy. That was. I'd like to do it again, actually. Actually, one of my daughters is turning 18, and she wants to go hot air ballooning. So we're looking at getting that set up, and I've never been hot air ballooning, but oh yes, yeah, okay. Excellent. Anyways, for those of you who've never heard of Creation Ministries, the Canadian office is right here in Kitchener. So I was at church in Markham a couple Sundays ago, and then I was on Edmonton the weekend before that, and we have speakers that go all over the place, but the Canadian office is local here, so that's nice. There's other offices. We're one of 7. We're not the only one. It's truly is an international ministry. And one of the things that makes us a little bit unique as a Christian ministry is, as far as we know, we employ more PhD scientists than any Christian organization. So that makes us a little bit different than your average Christian ministry. I'm not a scientist. I grew up here, went to Conestoga College, took the electronics program years ago, worked in that very happily at Raytheon and then ComDev for over a decade before coming on board with the ministry. But I work with scientists. And the reason we have the scientists on board is to do the research and do the heavy lifting, in a sense, for us, for the church, to answer the kinds of questions that often involve some science that come out of Genesis and the creation account. There's often some scientific related questions that people naturally have, and we're going to have a question time. That's why we have the scientists on board. We subscribe to all the major science publications that are out there. We keep tabs on what is going on in cutting-edge science around the world. And some of those articles are, of course, interpreted within an evolutionary framework, and we want to know about that too. We have 8 speakers in Canada, and we produce a TV show here, a weekly half-hour TV show. We've done lots of events in Canada. We produce a TV show called Creation Magazine Live. I'm the producer of that. I write a number of episodes. I'm also one of the hosts, and so we have fun doing that. We're shooting season 9 right now, if you can believe that, and that's all over the world. As an information ministry, that's what we do as a ministry. We want to get information, faith-building information out into the church in an area of Scripture where many Christians struggle in their faith. And as I said, that's Genesis 1 to 11. Those first 11 chapters, you have creation, the fall into sin, the flood of Noah, the Tower of Babel, and then Genesis 12, you get to Abraham, and it gets pretty normal after that. But Genesis 1 to 11, a lot of questions come out of that. And that's what we focus on as a ministry. And to get information out, we've got resources. I brought a small selection with me out in the hallway there. We've got speakers as well. We've got a website. Our website looks something like this. There's over 13,000 articles on the website. It is a massive online database of free information that you as parents or grandparents can use if your kids or grandkids or you have questions about creation evolution. There's a search window in the upper right-hand corner there. You can type in whatever question you might have. How did Noah get all the animals on the ark? And where did the water come from for a flood? And what about an ice age? And what about carbon dating? And what about radioactive dating, other types of radioactive dating, cavemen and ape men? And how come we're seeing the light from galaxies that are hundreds of millions of light years away if God didn't create that long ago? And where did Cain get his wife if he wasn't Abel? And other questions like that. You might have some of those questions. This is a great place to go to get answers to those kinds of questions. Now, the website name, I apologize, is really long and hard to remember, so I thought maybe we could say this all together. It's creation.com. Ready? Creation.com. Okay, it's not long and hard to remember. It's the easiest web address that you could think of if you're looking for information on creation. Mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, that's where you want to go. And have your kids go there, or youth. If you're experiencing things in school that that doesn't sound like it fits with the Bible, creation.com is a great safe place to go on the internet to get answers. And you can sign up for our email news. Our email news, that's another way to get information. Resources, speaking events, website. There's always something going on in the news regarding creation, evolution, secular theories about the Ice Age, dinosaur discoveries, all kinds of things. How does it fit with the Bible? Christians want to know. And so there's some sign-up sheets, and if we could start the sign-up sheets around at this time, or if I think James already has them around. Oh no, here they come. Yeah, info bites. And that's a free, it's an email news, and so you can get some of this information into your inbox. Every Friday, an email news comes out there, and that's another way you can get information. So, this evening, a Christian view of everything. I've kind of titled this evening's talk, A Christian View of Everything. There is a Christian view of everything. And we'll talk about the Christian view in some areas pertaining to creation, evolution. But we can start off with some basics. There's a Christian view of, for example, the afterlife. If we think of a Christian view of the afterlife, most of you are probably, like, what can we say about it? What's a Christian view of the afterlife? Anybody want to give that a shot? Just basics. Heaven? Did somebody say heaven? Yeah, okay.
Floating on clouds.
Floating on clouds? That's not quite, but it's actually going to be a physical heaven and physical earth. But we can say, first of all, there is one, right? And everyone spends eternity in one of two places, right? There's the basics, right? We could say much more about that, of course. What about the Christian view of morality? Good and evil. Well, we could think of the two greatest commandments, right? Love God, love your neighbor. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors yourself, right? So there are the Christian basics of morality, and obviously much more could be said. What about the Christian view of the meaning of life? Why are we here? What's our purpose? And so on. Well, the Westminster Confession, we can go back to those gentlemen there, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's their summary of biblical truths. That's our purpose in life. Now, what about evolution? Evolution also produces a world and life view. There's an evolutionary view of some of these things. For example, can you think of any atheists? Name an atheist. Anybody know any atheists?
Carl Sagan.
Dawkins. Carl Sagan's not an atheist anymore. He died. But Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, he's an atheist. He's a God hater. Doesn't like God. But he said quite a while ago, we live in a universe which has no design, no purpose, no evil and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Wow. So what kind of a view of the afterlife, morality, and the meaning of life would that produce? Very, very different than the biblical view, right? Here's another evolutionist, Dr. William Provine. He says, there are no gods, no purposeful forces of any kind, no life after death. There is no ultimate foundation for ethics, no ultimate meaning in life, and no free will for humans either. Wow. Okay, so he lays it on the line there. So origins, our view of where we came from, impacts world and life views. Worldviews, world and life views. And for example, if we wanted to kind of define world and life views, all world and life views begin with presuppositions. We believe certain things about the universe around us. You believe that you came from God, God created you, or you believe you evolved from pond scum. They produce different worldviews. And here, if you want kind of a dictionary definition, an individual's world and life view is his most fundamental beliefs or presuppositions about the universe he inhabits. It's his way of understanding reality and is the basis for making daily decisions and is therefore extremely important. That's one kind of, again, a dictionary definition of world and life views. And certainly the Christian world and life view would fall into that category. So the Christian world and life view begins with the authority of Scripture. That's where everything starts. It starts with the Bible. Start with what does God say? And that produces the Christian world and life view. Like, for example, if you've been influenced by evolutionary teaching that we all just evolved and we're not made in the image of God, that will affect your decisions about the value of human life, won't it? If we're just evolved animals, I mean, you get rid of spare cats, get rid of spare kids, same thing, right? If we're just evolved animals. The Christian world and life view begins even before we get to creation with the authority of Scripture. So in the beginning, the authority of the Bible. That's where it all starts. You can't even have a right view of creation if you don't start with the authority of the Bible. Go to God. He knows what was going on. Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones was a pastor. Actually, he was a surgeon in London, but an amazing Bible-teaching pastor over there across the pond. He said this: "There can be no doubt whatsoever that all the troubles in the church today and most of the troubles in the world are due to a departure from the authority of the Bible." That is a huge statement. All the troubles in the church and most of the troubles in the world are due to departure from the authority of the Bible. Martin Lloyd-Jones, incredible. The authority of the Bible, very, very important, especially for Christians, but also for the whole world. And if we kind of draw that in terms of a building, the Christian world and life view, if we think of buildings here in this part of the world, they're built on foundations that go down into the ground below the frost level, and it starts with the footings or the footer, right? That's what supports the weight even of the foundation. And so if we think of the footings as biblical authority, and here's what it looks like in real life, that's biblical authority. And then we move on from there to the foundation of the Christian world and life view. The foundation represents creation in 6 days, originally very good, then Adam sins, and the entrance of both physical and spiritual death, and that's the reason why we need a Savior, and that would be the main floor. That's where we live, and we invite guests, and so on. But creation is the foundation, very, very important. And before developing a Christian world and life view, we need to be sure about the genre of literature of Genesis. Right? If it's biblical authority, and we're getting our information about creation from Genesis, well, there's controversy about what Genesis is. We need to be sure that we're interpreting the Bible correctly. So, what genre is Genesis? Is it poetry? Is it history? Is it something else? A lot of people say it's poetry. If Genesis is poetry, maybe it's describing the evolutionary process in a poetical fashion. So maybe the evolutionary worldview is correct. Maybe that's how we should live our lives. But if it's history, then that produces a little different thing. So Hebrew poetry, for example, if we want to look at poetry and figure out what Genesis is, we're fortunate to have many great examples of Hebrew poetry that we can reference. We can look at the Psalms, for example, the Proverbs. One of the features of Hebrew poetry is parallelism. Here in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. That's an example of synonymous parallelism, where there's one statement followed by the same point using different words. That's a main feature of Hebrew poetry. And we have that's synonymous parallelism, the parallelism. There's also antithetical parallelism. That's where the first statement is followed by a statement of the opposite. The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. You can see that there? Synonymous parallelism, antithetical parallelism. That's a major feature, and there are some others of Hebrew poetry. So we have good examples of Hebrew poetry that we can use to understand Genesis. Does Genesis fit with Hebrew poetry? Dr. Stephen Boyd, who has a PhD in Hebraic and related languages, he did a computer analysis of the verb structure, the structure of the language of Genesis, and he discovered that Genesis 1, going a little bit into chapter 2, the probability that Genesis is history is 99.997%. Not 50-50, not, it could be poetry, could be history, it could go either way there. It's history. That's the way it's written. It's not poetry. Okay, so there we have a basis. And there's other things we could look at as well, but Dr. Boyd did a very interesting analysis there. So let's think of some other things that we can interpret within a Christian view. There's a Christian view of anthropology. Anthropos, man, people, humankind. There's a Christian view of humans, isn't there? Moving on a little, this might take a little bit more thinking for you to, well, what's that? What can we say about a Christian view of anthropology? Well, we can say that the male and female, two genders, were created by God in his image, not in the image of an ape, in God's image. They're equal, and there's one race. We all go back to Adam and Eve, regardless of our physical appearance and so on. That's the Christian view of anthropology. And a lot of our kids' books, you'll notice at the back, if you flip through them during the break, before the question time, or after when we're finished, you'll notice that we've got Adam and Eve as middle brown skin, not Caucasian white, not African black. Genetically, that makes the most sense. In Acts, we read that he made of one man every nation of mankind. And you find statements like that throughout the scripture. And it's easy, actually scientifically, starting with a middle brown couple, you can get the entire variation in skin shade. And that's not just a theory, that's not just, well, maybe it could happen if you have a middle brown couple. Years ago, in our Creation magazine, our flagship publication, here's a cover of that issue. See those babies at the bottom there? They're twins. One's black, one's white, same parents. There's their parents. Well, that's a little small picture, but their parents are middle brown skin that had a black baby and a white baby. And with a biblical view of anthropology, it's easy for us to explain, without any PhD in genetics, the distribution of skin shades around the world. There's a Christian view of anthropology. It all works out. What is the Christian view of the history of the earth? Well, if we go to Genesis and we read and deduce some things out of Genesis there, well, God created recently, we deduce that from Genesis, not too hard to do. In 6 days, there was a global flood, and then you have the Tower of Babel, where you have the origin of nations originally. They started there, and anyway, basic view of the history of the earth, ancient history. And a recent creation, that is not a new idea. Many people, I've got a 3-page table here of people and groups of people who've undertaken to do a study of how old is this earth, when did God create, when did he kick the whole thing off. A number of different people there, even famous scientists. Second from the top is Johann Kepler. Kepler was a famous scientist. He was the discoverer of the planetary laws of motion. And he believed the Bible. Many scientists in the past believed the Bible. And he's one who believed the Bible. And he did a calculation. When did creation begin? Using historical records and the Bible and so on. Came up with 3993 there. Second from the bottom is the Jewish calendar. The Jews don't count their years like we do, like 2022. You might know this. They count their years back to Adam and Eve. Their New Year's, which is typically in September, what they're celebrating at New Year's is an anniversary of the creation of Adam and Eve. That's cool. I think, like, what do we celebrate at New Year's? We celebrate the end of a calendar year. I mean, whoop-de-doo, right? They're celebrating, it's an anniversary of the creation of Adam and Eve. I think that's pretty cool. But the year right now in the Jewish calendar is 5782. They've got a couple hundred years to go yet to get to 6,000, but around 6,000 years, ballpark figures, right? Now, what about the days in creation? That's another question that people have. The days in Genesis, could they be millions of years long? Very popular question. Well, the word day has a range of meanings, just like about any word has a range of meanings, depending on the context. For example, it can mean the full rotation of a planet. It can mean, for example here, 1 day on the moon is 29 and a half Earth days. So both the word day, in both those cases, refers to a full rotation of a heavenly body, in this case, the Earth and the moon. That's one way to use the word day. It can also mean the light portion of an Earth rotation, right? We work in the day and we sleep at night. There, the word day refers to the daylight portion. Or it can refer to the portion of the day allotted to work or school. You know, my work day is 8 hours long, that kind of thing. That's not referring to the light portion or a full Earth rotation. It's referring to the work day or school day. My school day starts at 8:30 and it ends at 3. That's another usage of the word day. And we could think of the word day as synonymous with the word time. That's another way the word day is used. For example, in Genesis 2, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. The usage of the word day there, you could substitute the word time in the time. And some translations say when the Lord made the earth and the heavens. So the usage there, that's a different usage of the word day. And it can be a figure of speech. And there's a number of other like, go ahead, make my day, if you're familiar with the movies of the past there. But there's different figures of speech, right? So if it's not Genesis 2 or 3 or 5 or the New Testament that's controversial. It's Genesis 1. That's where the controversy over the word day is, nowhere else in Scripture. The first time the word day appears is in verse 5, right here. It appears twice, and it has a different meaning both times. That first meaning there, which one is that? God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So in that context, it's referring to the light portion of an Earth rotation, right? Is that difficult? It's pretty simple, right? Now, what about that last one? There was evening, there was morning, the first day. 24 hours. It's 24 hours. It's one cycle of light and dark, right? That's not difficult. It's as plain as day. And this is, why is the word controversial? Let me throw that question out. Why is it controversial? And it's only controversial, as I said, in Genesis 1. It's not controversial anywhere else. When Jesus said the Son of Man will be handed over to the scribes and Pharisees, and they will mock him and beat him, and he'll be killed, and on the third day, he'll rise again. We're celebrating that this weekend. Do people sit around and argue over the meaning of the word day in that passage? No, right? Everybody gets what it means. But it's controversial in Genesis. Why? Because it's hard to understand? No. It's because of outside ideas, isn't it? If we're honest, it's because of outside ideas that are affecting our interpretation of the biblical text. We need to be careful. And if that wasn't enough, you can look in Exodus, where the Ten Commandments are given. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. God made everything in 6 days and rested for one. Why? God could have made everything in 6 seconds, or 6 billion years, or instantly. He could have. But the Bible says he did it in 6 days. Why? Because this is the commandment about keeping the seventh day of rest. That's what it's all about. God created in 6 days and rested for a day. So, yeah, the word days in Genesis, ordinary days, so recent creation in 6 days, and global flood, and then the Tower of Babel. We can sort of, if we picture it, might look like this. There's the 6 days. God creates something different on each one of the days. And then at the end of that, now here's a key, talking about the history of the earth, here's a key event in the history of the earth. Initially, God calls his creation very good. Initially, the creation was very good. Is the creation very good today? No. There's a remnant of that very good world, right? We can see some amazing sunset, or a flower, or some animal that does some incredible thing. But there's also very bad things, right? There's both moral evil and natural evil. Moral evil is evil people doing evil things, and because we're all sinners, we all contribute to that, unfortunately. And natural evil, earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, flood, drought, disease, cancer, COVID. There's all kinds of things that speak of this world not being very good. What happened to God's very good world? This happened. Adam and Eve sinned. And that made Apple computers. Adam and Eve sinned. And that's a major event in the Christian history, the biblical history of the world. That's how we can explain, that's the foundation of explaining why there's death and suffering in the world, and God is still all good and all powerful. That's the understanding biblical history is the foundation for providing an answer in that area. A lot of people question why there's evil in the world. That provides the foundation for that. History moves on. In Genesis 6 to 9, we read about a global flood. That was a major event. Bible-believing scientists believe there was one continent originally, broke apart rapidly during the flood. Lots of interesting things happening there. And then many years after that event, we get to the central event of the whole history of the universe, the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. Even our calendar hinges on that event there, and we're going to, again, celebrate that this weekend. So if we put dates to these events here, because it's been said that if you have events with no dates, what you're left with is once upon a time. You're left with a fairy tale. So dates are people taking history, if some of you students are taking history, you hate this now, but what, dates? And yeah, we got to deal with dates, especially when it comes to biblical history. So this was around 4000 BC, about 6,000 years ago. And again, just ballpark figures here, and nothing exact. The flood was about 2400, 2500, 2300 BC, and Jesus was crucified and raised either in 30 or 33. There's arguments kind of going both ways for arguing for both of those. So there's a quick summary of biblical history. But of course, science says something different, doesn't it? We can deduce that from the Bible, but science says, well, no, that's not correct at all. The world's millions of years old. So, since the Christian world and life view is the true view, is true, everything should fit into that view, and it should not fit neatly into the millions of years, the one that isn't based on the Bible. And now we can look at some science. We can see, actually, we can play a little game. Which history fits best? Which history, the biblical history, or the millions of years, the history that doesn't come from the Bible, evolutionary history, we evolved from apes and so on, which history provides the best framework for understanding what scientists are seeing in the world today? So we'll keep track of our progress in a little chart here. We'll look at some scientific observations and see which of those histories fits best. We'll do a few examples. You'll see how this goes. It's a lot of fun, actually. Here's the first one. The Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker over time. I'm talking about the total strength of the field, not flipping back and forth. It has flipped many times, probably during the flood, rapid flipping. The overall strength of the magnetic field is getting weaker. And there's been measurements going back to about 1835 that suggest the field is decaying at about 5% per century. And there's archaeological discoveries from about 1,000 years ago that you can measure the field in some of these things, and it's about 40% stronger 1,000 years ago. There's evidence pointing in that direction. So if we extrapolate that back, you get back to about 10,000 years ago, at about 10, not 10 million, only 10,000 years ago, the magnetic field of the Earth would have been so strong, it would have started to melt the Earth. But evolutionists say the Earth is 4.5 billion, with a B, billion years old. Which history fits best? The biblical history is the hands-down winner here, isn't it? I love being a Christian. This is great. It's wonderful. Here's a scientific observation that beautifully fits with biblical history. And it's very difficult to make that science fit with millions of years. You've got to, well, maybe it didn't, whatever. It fits with the Bible. It fits with the Bible. It's great. Let's do another one. The erosion of the continents. Rivers are like freight trains taking sediment from the land and depositing it in the ocean. Day after day, month after month, century after century, the average height reduction for all continents is about 6 centimeters per 1,000 years. Now, at that rate, the continents would be eroded down to sea level in only 10 million years. And let's pretend that the flood never happened, because of course that's going to erode continents a whole lot faster. But let's just go with river erosion. Now, evolutionists say the continents are 2.5 billion years old. Do you know how much continent you could erode in 2.5 billion years at the rates measured today? You could have eroded a continent down to sea level that began 150 kilometers tall. Which history fits best? It's biblical history. Again, is the winner. I love being a Christian. See how this works? It's fun. I told you it was fun. It's great. Let's keep going. Supernova remnants. See, do you know what a supernova is? Supernova is a star that's exploded. A supernova remnant is what's left over after the star explodes. It's the leftover gas and dust, and it often produces beautiful objects in space. This is the Crab Nebula here. It's illuminated by other stars in the area and so on. The leftover gas and dust, a supernova remnant. And there's another supernova remnant. You can see some of these pictures on the Hubble Space Telescope website. So we can make some predictions here. There are different stages of supernova remnants. The third stage are the very oldest, very largest supernova remnants. And looking just at our galaxy, just at the Milky Way, if we go with the standard Big Bang model that we've all heard and that's on TV and in the textbooks and everywhere, if the Milky Way really is billions of years old, we should see about 5,000 of the very oldest, very largest supernova remnants. But if the Bible's history is anywhere close to being accurate, the predictions are very, very different. We really shouldn't be seeing any of those very oldest, very largest supernova remnants. So now, if we turn to the scientists, okay, what are you seeing in your telescopes? What's actually out there in our galaxy? Here's the data. The Milky Way is not billions of years old. Which history fits best? Biblical history wins again. Cool, I love being a Christian. Have I said that before? Maybe I have. Let's keep going. Dinosaurs. And now you're thinking, okay, well now you've bitten off more than you can chew, because dinosaurs fit with evolution, right? That's what we've all heard. They died millions of years ago, and so, well, let's just have a look. Scientists have made incredible discoveries in dinosaur fossils over the last 15, 20 years. Soft tissue. There's soft tissue, varieties of soft tissue in dinosaur bones. More than 85 discoveries now, and that figure's old actually. It's almost every month or two there's a new discovery, not just dinosaurs but other reptiles and so on, that kind of thing. Soft and stretchy tissue, that is under a microscope from a T-Rex. You're looking at T-Rex soft and stretchy tissue there. Different kinds of blood cells and blood vessels have been found. Those are from a Triceratops, in the bottom right there, and a little blood cell. You can see that's Triceratops blood there. And different kinds of dinosaur proteins have been analyzed, including histones. That's the kind of protein associated with forming the double helical structure of DNA. And little bits of dino DNA have been discovered. Those are incredible discoveries. I mean, not enough to have Jurassic Park all over again, so don't get too worried. But those are incredible discoveries. Which history fits best? Now, remember, the evolutionary history says dinosaurs all died out about 65 million years ago. But obviously, these ones didn't. Yes, aliens. Aliens put them to aliens. Aliens are the answer for everything. Aliens did it. How did we get here? Aliens. The Bible's history here is the hands-down winner, again, surprisingly, because most people think, well, no, dinosaurs fit with evolution. But if you believe that dinosaurs died 65 million years ago, now you have a problem with science. Because science can prove that biological structures, organic tissue, like what scientists are finding, doesn't last 65 million years. It rots. Doesn't last that long. Powerful support for biblical history, for the Christian view in these things. Let's do one more. Canyon formation. Anybody been to Grand Canyon before? I've been to Grand Canyon, yeah. Beautiful place. There are other canyons around the world. Here's Bryce Canyon. We were there a number of years ago as a family with our motorhome. Beautiful places all around the world. Here's in the American Southwest. But what's the typical history that's applied to canyon formation? If you've been to Grand Canyon or wherever, it's millions of years, isn't it? Slow and gradual river erosion over eons of time produced things like this. And here, again, here's Grand Canyon. I went whitewater rafting for 5 days, massive whitewater through Grand Canyon. And river erosion, here's the Fraser River going through a valley. If we think of river erosion and canyon formation and so on, obviously more powerful rivers like the Fraser River are going to erode valleys faster than smaller rivers like this one here, right? So more water means faster canyon erosion. Okay, so now if we put on our biblical thinking caps, well, there was a time in biblical history when there was much more water. Okay, so could biblical history provide a superior explanation for the canyons that we see around the world, particularly at the end of the flood when the water started getting lower and then rushing off of the continents? Hey, there's a lot of scientists, Bible-believing scientists, thinking along those lines. Is that just a theory? Or do we have actual evidence of canyons forming not by river erosion, but by something more catastrophic? Obviously, we don't have a global flood, but actually we do have examples. This canyon here, about 600 feet across and 150 feet deep, it's sizable. It's not as big as Grand Canyon, obviously, but a sizable little canyon, and you'll notice a river running down the middle of the canyon. And if we didn't know the history of this area, we might suppose that that river formed the canyon over hundreds or maybe into the thousands of years, but we would be wrong. That canyon didn't take 1,000 years, didn't take 100 years. Didn't take 10 years, didn't even take 1 year. That canyon was formed in a day. It's a one-day canyon, about 600 feet across, 150 feet deep. How? Obviously, it wasn't river erosion. This is a picture from the base of Mount St. Helens in southern Washington state. Mount St. Helens is a volcano. What happened was the volcano erupted. There was ice and snow up on top of the mountain that melted very quickly, and that produced a mud flow that came through this area twice highway speed, carving out that canyon. Or maybe highway speed, depending on how fast you folks drive around here. But in any case, it was a rapid event. And then the river formed. It's interesting thinking about the relationship of the river to the canyon. The river wasn't even there before the canyon was there. The reason there's a river there today is because when it rains, the rainwater collects in the canyon and it forms a stream. But the river, in this case, had nothing to do with the canyon's formation. Very interesting thinking about what happened there. If we look at the sidewalls of this canyon, see that layer between the yellow dotted lines? That was laid down in about 3 hours on June 12, 1980, again as a result of an eruption of the volcano. What blew geologists' minds is when they had a close-up view of that layer. Here's a close-up view. Look at that fine layering. Geologists are used to thinking of those fine layers, just millimeters thick there you can see, as maybe 1 or 2 of them being laid down a year, like two layers a year. And yet here's dozens of layers in just a few inches in a sequence that was deposited in 3 hours. It's incredible, some of the things that happen around Mount St. Helens. And the more that Bible-believing scientists look at the canyons around the world, the more we're coming to the conclusion that the biblical history provides by far the superior explanation for canyon formation, as it does in all of these other areas. And we could play this game all night here, looking at scientific observation after scientific observation. The world around us screams support for the biblical text. The Christian world and life view is the correct view, and it fits with the world around us. Grand Canyon, again, there's even a DVD at the back there, Rafting the Canyon, featuring a lot of the pictures I took and the rocks and fossils we looked at. I was rafting the canyon with creation geologists and paleontologists. And we were studying the evidence in the canyon for rapid deposition of the layers and rapid erosion of the canyon in a post-flood type scenario. And guess what? The more we study Grand Canyon, the more we're coming away with the notion that it could not have formed via river erosion. That's an inadequate mechanism for producing what we see here. It fits with a global flood, again. So we're talking about the history of the earth. And so, again, we talked a little bit about geology there. We see evidence of rapid deposition and rapid erosion fits with a global flood. That's what we'd expect if there was a global flood. If the Bible's right about there being a global flood, that's what we see in the world around us. And we talked about astronomy. For example, the Supernova Remnants. We talked about that. Good evidence that the Big Bang does not work. A Christian view of astronomy fits the data far better than a non-Christian view. What about fossils? What about paleontology? And at this point, some of you might be saying, who cares about the Christian view of fossils? There's already people leaving. So, no, Adam's a good guy. We grew up together with Pastor James here. We're in the same youth group. You might be thinking, who cares? What? They have no bearing on any doctrines of Scripture or anything to do with my life. They have no connection to the gospel. My view on paleontology doesn't matter at all. All right. Well, let's just bear with me if that's your position for a few minutes, and let's have a look at paleontology. Scientists have found some very interesting and I would say disturbing things in the fossil record. The fossil record is obviously a record of dead things. It's also a record of pain, diseases, and many diseases in the bones there in the fossil record that scientists have different kinds of cancer, osteoporosis, TB, many other severe arthritis. There's extinction in the fossil record, carnivory, there's fossil thorns, and there's fossil humans, very high in the fossil record. So with all of those things that scientists have discovered in the fossil record, let me throw out this question, get us really thinking about the Christian view of paleontology. Where do fossils fit? I'm talking about biblical history. We can put up a snippet of biblical history here. Where do the fossils fit? Now, I think they fit here. That's just a beautiful connection. You've got a mechanism, a global mechanism, rapidly burying plants and animals, beautifully preserving some of them as fossils. Works really well. It also fits wonderfully with Scripture. For example, in the Bible, we have verses like this: thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. So thorns and thistles were not a part of the very good creation, right? They were part of the curse. They came in at the time of the curse. So since there are fossil thorns in the fossil record must have been produced after the curse, right? Put it together here. And then, of course, the fossil record is a record of death. It's really a testimony to what happened when Adam and Eve sinned and God cursed his creation and death came into the world. And we read in Romans 5, therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, that's the first Adam, and death through sin, so death spread to all men because all sinned. Now, this is referring specifically to human death, but there's other verses that refer to just bad things. God cursed his creation. And by the way, there are human fossils in the fossil record. And then, of course, Jesus, who's nicknamed the last Adam, paid the price of death, which is the price that God enacted for sin. He paid the price of physical death so that we could be absolved from our sins. And it all works out. That's happy. That's great. But many people say that's not where the fossils go. The fossils were laid down over millions of years. It's millions of years, so they go over here. Can you see some problems with that? That would mean the fossil record was already there when God called his creation very good, and that was roughly 6 to 10, if you want to stretch it out, years ago. So the fossils were there, and God steps back and says, my completed creation is very good. Death is very good. Cancer is very good. Violent bloodshed, animals ripping each other up, all very good. Of course not. That's not the way the Bible describes God. That's not the way God describes himself in the Bible. And so if God doesn't call cancer and pain and those things we see in the fossil record very good, so we have to now we're forced to reinterpret that. Well, that doesn't, we kind of spiritualize that. It's just spiritual death and so on. Well, then why did God tell Adam, I made you from dust, you're going to go back to dust as a result of sin? That's physical death, isn't it? Physical death is a result of sin. But you have to kind of, no, it's just spiritual. Then what about that next one? It was supposed to be because of sin that death and these bad things come into existence. It's the transition from very good to not very good. But if the world is already not very good, as recorded in the fossil record, then you have to break the link between sin and death. Sin has nothing to do with death. Death was already around. All these bad things were already going on. Adam's sin really didn't do much of anything. There's death and bloodshed and terrible things before Adam sinned, and there's death and bloodshed today. So you have to sort of read that out of Scripture. And then what about the next one, global flood? Well, if the fossils were already there, a global flood would have ripped up all the fossil record and redistributed it. So people, and this is what they do, people who believe, no, it's millions of years for the fossil record, they have to say that Noah's flood was a little flood, local flood, not a global flood. So you have to reinterpret a global flood. And if it was a local flood, why did God just not tell Noah to get up and move? It would have been a lot simpler than building a massive ark. He told Abraham that a few chapters later. Could have told Noah the same thing. Now, what about that last one there? We don't want to X that one out. That's the central teachings of our faith. And yet, logically, we're forced to. If you break the link between sin and death that was established back in Genesis when Adam and Eve first sinned, then the main teaching of Christianity is destroyed. If there's no connection between sin and death, then Jesus didn't die to pay for our sins. So this celebration that's coming up here on the weekend is a tremendous waste of time. If that little sequence of events is accurate. Doesn't make any sense. So, this is not a side issue, is it? Our view on paleontology, the Christian view or non-Christian view on paleontology, has incredible consequences if we get it wrong. And there's There's atheists and God-haters that understand the value of this. We interviewed this gentleman here, Peter Bowler, for our Darwin documentary that's out on the table there. 2009 was the 200th anniversary of Darwin's birth and the 150-year anniversary of the publishing of Origin of Species. And we did a major documentary on Darwin. This guy here says, if Christians accepted that humanity was the product of evolution, even assuming the process could be seen as an expression of the Creator's will, then the whole idea of original sin would have to be reinterpreted. Far from falling from an original state of grace in the Garden of Eden, we have arisen gradually from our animal origins, he says. And if there is no sin from which we needed salvation, what was the purpose of Christ's agony on the cross? See, he sees the connection between, if you get rid of Genesis, get rid of Adam, well, we just evolved from ape men and so on, and if Adam didn't really sin, then we don't really need a Savior. And non-Christians make this connection. And quote from Martin Lloyd-Jones again, people who think that you can cut out the early chapters of Genesis and still have a Christian gospel are just displaying their ignorance, he says. That's pretty blunt. Yeah, again, Martin Lloyd-Jones. But this is the correct view. This produces a consistent Christian worldview. Our understanding of the fossils affects the gospel. You may have never thought about that before. You might have paleontology. I'm a Christian. I'm on about Jesus. I don't need to. Who cares about the fossils? And yet, if we get it wrong, it has dramatic impact on the gospel. So, paleontology, animals and plants are buried rapidly and recently, buried in a global flood. That's a Christian view of paleontology. And it works out. We don't have theological nightmares of death before sin and everything backwards and so on. A Christian world and life view is the best framework for scientific observations. And it produces, of course, a basis for much more than that: law, government, art, economics, education, family, etc., etc. That's the basis for our whole society. Even if we understand most branches of science were founded by creationists. Here's a list of some of the major branches of science, and all those people there believed in God, that God the Creator, believed that God created. They'd maybe had different views about creation and the timeline and so on, but they were all creationists of sorts. And you can't even do science if you don't start with a Christian worldview. People who do science today and are not Christians, they have to borrow the Christian world and life view in order to do science. I'll give you an example. Number one, you have to assume that there's such a thing as objective truth. And that might sound, well, isn't that the case? I mean, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That's an objective truth. But postmodernism says, for example, there is no objective truth. Many Eastern philosophies say that the universe is an illusion. A physical universe doesn't exist. You can't do science if you don't think the universe is physical. And then you have to assume that the universe is real. Again, that's Eastern philosophies. The universe is an illusion. It's just a spiritual thing or whatever. You can't do science like that. You have to assume that it's real. And in the Bible, we have a basis for making that assumption, logically, from a biblical perspective. You have to assume that the universe is orderly. You have to assume it, but why should it be orderly? If there was no creator, or if Zeus and his gang were in charge, or if there's gods that are constantly warring among themselves, what would be the basis for the assumption that the universe is orderly, that it obeys ordered, fixed laws that don't change? Now, Hebrews 13:8 says, it describes God as the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's a good basis for the assumption that the universe that God created is going to obey fixed laws. From a Christian worldview, we have a basis for making that assumption. Assumption number 3. Here's another one. There's others as well. We'll stop after this one. The universe has to be ordered in such a way that humans can perceive the order through scientific experiments. So if it's ordered, why should it be ordered in a way that we can perceive it? That's another assumption that you have to make. I mean, if the universe just popped into existence all by itself, on what basis would you expect it to be ordered and in such a way that humans can perceive the order? It's an assumption you have to make in order to do science. And the Bible provides a basis for that assumption, God is sovereign. He created an actual physical universe and gave humans the ability and the responsibility to manage the earth. There's the basis for the assumptions that humans must be able to understand the creation that God created, because he commanded us to manage it. So in the Christian world and life view, really, we're the only ones that can consistently do science and understand the assumptions in order to do science. So now what? That's been a lot of information, and there's a Christian view of paleontology. Maybe some of you never considered that before. What do we do with all this? The foundation of the Christian world and life view is creation, which itself rests on the authority of the Bible. You're not going to get creation right if you don't start with the authority of the Bible. But that's the foundation of the structure. Creation is the foundation. The Christian world and life view provides the best framework for understanding the world, including scientific discoveries. And again, we could play that game, which history fits best, all night here. The more you grow in your understanding of the foundations of the Christian world and life view, the better you'll be able to understand and navigate issues in the world today. It's one of the great advantages of understanding the Christian world and life view. Colossians says, "See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit according to human tradition and not according to Christ." The sad fact is that people are being taken captive and deceived today. Many people. There's been surveys done. One of the most extensive surveys, the National Study of Youth and Religion, this most extensive sociological project on youth and religion ever undertaken. It's conducted over a 16-year period, 99 to 2015. Over 2,000 13 to 17-year-olds were interviewed across the U.S. It's a U.S. study. The study started in their teens, and it followed them through into their mid to late 20s, asking in-depth questions regarding faith, spirituality, family, moral behavior, and so on. Here's one of the quotes by one of the guys who ran it. By age 13, 70% of youth from all Christian denominations indicate that they strongly agree that the teachings of science and religion often ultimately conflict with each other. That's what they believe. That's not what we've seen here tonight. The teachings of science strongly support what the Bible says. And again, we could look at many other scientific discoveries, and yet 70% of young people think, no, they contradict. It's amazing. And we did some surveys ourselves. One of our guys in the States went and interviewed students, university students at a local university. We interviewed more than 100 students, and there was a pattern that developed. Now, every one of these students had a church background. I'll play the video here for you, and you can follow this pattern through here.
Creation or evolution, which do you believe?
I'd probably have to say evolution.
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 Is there any powerful argument that makes you think evolution is true that causes that confusion?
I think the studies that have been done on apes and monkeys are pretty compelling.
I think that the genetic sequence can change over time, over millions and billions of years.
Mostly fossil records and just databases of really just the fossil records.
In your church background, were you ever exposed to any scientific evidence for creation by your church leaders, pastors, anything like that?
Definitely not.
Nothing in particular, no.
No, I don't believe so.
Do you still attend church today or not anymore?
Only for holidays.
We kind of stopped going together as a family, but...
Did your church leaders, student leaders, bring in any creation teaching that showed you there was scientific evidence to support the Bible's account of creation?
Yes. Yeah, we learned a lot about different creationist scientists and the proof of young Earth creationism.
What are you studying now?
Biology.
Biology, right. Steeped in evolution. So, but you're not convinced by the evolutionary arguments in your biology classes?
No.
Still attend church today?
Yes. Yes, sir. Yeah, every Sunday.
Would it be fair to say then that being able to discuss creation openly at church has helped strengthen you in that area, prepare you for what you've learned here at college about evolution?
Yes.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, that first statistic there, 70% of youth have difficulty with science and religion. But there's also good news. of all these students we interviewed, you notice the pattern there, right? Those who are at university and still believe creation, they were given answers growing up in the church when they were younger. It's a church like this. They had a creation speaker come in, or they got a book, or there was a website, or there's some articles or something what happens is they become inoculated against evolutionary arguments. Even the one girl there was in biology class, evolutionary biology. Are you convinced by the arguments? No. Your mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, your kids and grandkids can go through university and survive in their faith, but they have to be equipped.
All right, Aaliyah has a question here.
Okay.
Yes, I have two questions, actually.
I'll put up while you're asking your question, the others can read some questions off the screen there. Those are typical questions that people have. If there's something up there that's always bugged you, you can shout out the number. But you don't have to ask questions off the screen. If there's something in Genesis that you've always piqued your curiosity, then certainly ask that question. But go ahead.
Hi. So why do they call Good Friday if Jesus died?
That's not a creation question.
Oh, are only creation questions allowed?
He died to overcome sin.
Right.
He died so that we might be justified.
Okay.
So that eventually we might be glorified, so that we could spend forever with him. That is why it's good. I certainly understand your question. Why is it good? It was an unspeakable evil, but God used it for tremendous good, didn't he? Yeah.
You know, it's funny, that question, we have a video that answers that question. So that we're going to play on Good Friday. So come on Good Friday if you want more to that answer. That was an awesome answer though, Richard. But we have a whole video about that we're going to open the service with on Friday. So that's hilarious that you asked that. And she had one more. Is it a creation question? All right.
Okay. So what was that you said about the two people that created all of the races?
Yes. Right. Yeah. You'll notice in our kids' books, like today we have people with different skin shade, right? You have all these different skin shades, and people tend to. There's dark-skinned people in some areas, light-skinned people in other areas. And so how did that come about? I'll give you a quick, how did that come about? And you'll see it's not that hard to understand. You don't need to be a geneticist to understand the genetics and how everything works out. As I said, and as we have in our kids' books and so on, Adam and Eve were probably middle brown. And you remember the Creation magazine article that we had? We had a middle brown mom and dad, and they had a white baby and a black baby. Now, most of their kids, and most of the world's still middle brown today, most of their kids are going to be somewhere around middle brown, a little lighter, a little darker. Just genetically, that's how it would work out. But it can work out. See, all of us have a pigment in our skin called melanin. There's a couple different types. There's a brownish type and a reddish type. And your DNA, your genes, instruct your body as to how much of that pigment to produce. And that will determine the shade of your skin. So all of us have melanin, except albinos. If there's anybody that's albinism, there's albino snakes, and there's an albino moose I recently saw a picture of, completely white with pink eyes. Because melanin affects your hair color, it affects your iris color as well, and it's not just humans that can be albino, but leaving that's a mutation. It's a mutation in our genes that shuts down the production of melanin. So leaving that aside, in a middle brown, Noah and his family was probably middle brown. The population at the Tower of Babel happened about 100 years or so after the flood. The population at Babel was probably middle brown. So, from a middle brown population at Babel, and then you remember the account, right? That God confuses their languages, probably in family groups, and so they move away and only mix within themselves, and they move to different climate areas. That's a key. We need sunlight to penetrate our skin to help process vitamin D. If let's imagine the group that moves from Babel northward into what becomes Europe and England eventually, that kind of thing. North Babel was in the Middle East, Babylon, Babel. You go northward. Now it's harsher winters. You have less sunlight in the winter. It would be advantageous for people so you got a middle brown population, and the kids are going to be various shades. Some will be lighter, some will be darker, that kind of thing. Or you get those twins where one's very light and one's very dark. The people with less pigment in their skin are going to have more sunlight penetrating. So you need sunlight to process vitamin D. Vitamin D is very healthy for immunity. We should all be, as Canadians, we're too far north. We should be taking vitamin D supplements. That's especially in a COVID world, very important for immunity. And so the people in that part of the world with the genetic instructions for less pigment end up being healthier, leaving more offspring. So after a while, all you get in that part of the world are people with light skin, with a little bit of pigment. The people with the information to produce lots of melanin, darker skin, don't get as much sunlight penetrating their skin. It shields out, it's a natural sunblock. It shields out sunlight from penetrating deeply enough to produce vitamin D, less healthy, less offspring, over a number of generations. That climate area is going to favor the humans with the genetic instructions for a small amount of pigment. And so after a while, you get light skin. You get English people. The opposite happens with a group that moves southward from Babel into, let's say, North Africa, closer to the equator. It's hot. You don't have harsh winters where you're wearing thick clothing and not getting any sunlight on your skin for days in a row. It's hot. You're going to be, lots of sunlight. You don't want too much. That's not good either. So you want to limit the amount of sunlight. So it's advantageous in that part of the world. Again, the middle ground population moves from Babel. They produce little lighter, little darker offspring, little darker, little lighter kids. The environment is going to favor those with the genetic instructions for more melanin, more pigment in the skin. Then you don't get skin cancer and you don't get all the other problems with too much sun. It's healthier over the long run. They leave more offspring. And after a while, in that part of the world, you get people with lots of pigment in their skin. Dark people. So we can understand that, starting with biblical history and basic genetics. It's high school genetics, nothing more complicated than that. We as Christians, starting again from the Bible, we can explain the distribution of skin shades around the world. You know what the evolutionary view is? Darwin, who popularized the old version of evolution. It's changed quite a bit since him. But Darwin, in books that he wrote after The Origin of Species in 1859, he wrote The Descent of Man, for example, and in that he talks about how, different races have evolved at different speeds, you see. And since Darwin was a white man from England, he said that the white people have evolved the fastest, so they're the furthest from the animals. And people with very dark skin, they haven't evolved very fast, like the Australian Aborigines. Some of the darkest, almost black skin, they haven't evolved very quickly. So they're more like animals. And so there was times in the 1800s where there was white hunters that would go to Australia and they would shoot every Aboriginal that they came to because they thought they're not evolved enough to understand white man culture. So racism was around before Darwin, but and there's evolutionists that have said this, it exploded with the acceptance of Darwinian evolution. And evolution today is still inherently racist. Let me quickly add that today's evolutionist is not necessarily a racist. Okay, but it's still inherently racist. I'll give you an example. In textbooks, you're going to have to imagine this. I don't have an image. You all know the image of the ape to man sequence, right? The ape, and it looks a little more human. What is the skin shade along that trajectory? It's dark to light, isn't it? I don't even get, in our woke culture today, how that's allowed in textbooks. What's it saying? It's saying that people with darker skin are less evolved than people with lighter skin. How is that allowed today? It's incredibly racist. It's inherently racist. And there's other racist ideas. But again, today's evolutionist is not racist. Let me quickly add that. I'm just saying the theory has racism built in. So, anyways, very different views on skin shade, where people came from, and so on. Easy for us. All people come from one race. We all go back to Noah. We all go back to Adam and Eve. Explaining the distribution of skin shade is not that hard. So, thank you. Any other questions? Number three. Could millions of years fit between Genesis 1 and 1:2? Yes. That was a popular notion years ago called the gap theory. That's the name that's been applied to that. So you have Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And then Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the deep. And the theory was that in between those two verses, there was a gap of millions or possibly billions of years. That's where Lucifer was cast down when he became Satan. That's when that happened. And there was something called Lucifer's flood that the Bible never really talks about, but that produced the fossil record. And then it's actually a flood that produced the fossil record, but it's millions of years anyway. It's sort of a convoluted idea. But that came about when the notion of millions of years began to become more popular. See, before like the early 1800s, going back into the 1700s, let's say in the early 1700s, most people believed that God created recently. That was the popular notion in society. This world is young. It's the opposite today, isn't it? And when the notion of millions of years began to be popularized, Christians, like honest men in the church, thought, oh, okay, if this is what scientists are saying about the history of the world, well, we need to incorporate millions of years into Scripture. And that was one of the ways that they did it. But again, you notice what's going on, right? You're taking outside ideas and you're using those to force an interpretation on the text. That is never a good idea. But anyway, that's what happened. It's called the gap theory. And it was popularized by a Scottish pastor, Thomas Chalmers. He was a great pastor for the most part. And the thing is, he didn't go back to the original Hebrew. If he had, the gap theory would probably never have been as popular as it was today. It's not that popular today anymore. It's really dropped off the last couple decades or so. But the idea was, well, okay, going back to the Hebrew. A Hebrew reader, if you could read the Bible in the original Hebrew, like if you're Jewish or something, you would never come up with a gap theory, because at the beginning of many of the sentences or paragraphs throughout chapter 1, there's a certain Hebrew letter, certain Hebrew word called a waw, or a vav, V-A-V or W-A-W, depending on biblical Hebrew or modern Hebrew. And it's a joining word, and there's different types of vavs. There's vav consecutives and vav disjunctives. And most of the sentences throughout chapter 1 is vav consecutives. Now, to a Hebrew reader, they would understand that this is a part of the narrative sequence. This happened, and then this, there's that vav consecutive, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, they're joined together. Verse 2 doesn't begin with a vav consecutive, it begins with a vav disjunctive. So a Hebrew reader would instantly recognize that verse 2 is not a part of the sequence. It's best understood as a comment on verse 1. It's almost like brackets. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then verse 2, and oh, by the way, the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the deep. It's just giving additional information about verse 1. It's impossible to put a gap of time between verse 1 and verse 2, because that's not a part of the sequence. And there are other things in Hebrew. For example, Pastor Chalmers saw in his King James, his English translation, that Adam and Eve were commanded to replenish the earth. Replenish the earth. Now, the word replenish to us, and also in the 1800s when Pastor Chalmers was teaching this, what does replenish mean? It means to refill, doesn't it? But back in the 1600s, when the King James Bible was written, that was a faithful translation, because the original Hebrew has nothing to do about refilling, it means to fill. Adam and Eve were commanded to fill the earth, not refill. Because he thought, oh, well, if they were refilling the earth, there must have been a previously living group of people, and so he added that into the gap theory. Oh, there was people who lived and died before Adam and Eve, and you got death before sin, you might as well throw out the gospel, right? It's another problem with the gap theory. And there's other problems as well. But again, a Hebrew reader, see, the word replenish has changed meanings in English. In English, 400 years ago, that was a faithful rendering in the King James, when the King James was translated. Because the Hebrew means to fill, and the word replenish at that time meant to fill. But today, and also in the 1800s with Pastor Chalmers, it's changed meanings to refill. And he missed that as well. And there's other difficulties with the gap theory. But all right, other questions? Yes, you had.
All right, so this kind of fits in with your question 8 up there. My question is this. When I was teaching, I taught about the canopy theory.
Yes.
Now, my understanding is that the canopy theory is no longer in vogue, so to speak. But the canopy theory would somewhat explain the answer to question 8. So,
Where the water came from for the flood. Yeah.
what's going on with the canopy theory?
Yeah. Does everybody hear the question? It's about the water vapor canopy, the canopy theory. There was a notion of, who's heard of this? A layer of water vapor around the earth. Yeah, okay. Before the flood, and the idea was, answer to question 8, that was precipitated at the time of the flood, and that produced the 40, at least 40 days and 40 nights of rain. The flood was over a year. Noah and the animals were on the ark, but at least 40 days and 40 nights of rain. Then the water kept going up for 150 days, so 5 months. But that theory has gone by the wayside. There's scientific problems with it. It's not really needed to explain things like that and the other things it was meant to explain, worldwide greenhouse effect, people living to nearly 1,000 years, that kind of thing. It's not needed for that. And most seriously, it's not supported biblically. Let's start with the most serious one first. The Bible says in like day 2, God separates the waters below from the waters above. Day 1 is light. God creates light and darkness, and it was evening and the morning the first day, and so on day 2, God separates the waters below the expanse from the waters above the expanse. So there's a distance, an expanse, a firmament between the waters above and the waters below. Waters below, probably the oceans. That's a pretty safe bet. There's not a lot of controversy there. The waters above is a little bit more difficult to figure out. That was where the notion of the canopy came from. These are waters that are in the upper atmosphere that would shield out harmful radiation from space, and they would, and produce a beautiful greenhouse effect so that the fossils that we have from the time of Noah, the massive plant fossils, there was giantism. You have dragonflies with a 2-foot wingspan, things like that, a lot of large animals. And it was thought that it would also lead, this water vapor canopy shielding out harmful radiation from space, which is what it would do if it were there, would lead to people living to 1,000 years. So that was on day 2. The problem is on day 5, God creates, okay, so on day 2, the waters above the expanse. Okay, so the waters above the expanse, their location could be in the upper atmosphere. But on let's back to day 4. On day 4, God places into the expanse, same word, the sun, moon, and stars. So now what's the location of the waters above the expanse? They're not in the atmosphere. They're somewhere out in space. And there's different ideas. Are they in the Milky Way? Is that the edge of the universe? And the Apostle Paul says he was caught up to the third heavens. Is the first heavens, the atmosphere, the birds fly in the heavens. That's the atmosphere. And then we have the heavenly bodies. That's planets and stars. And then we have, is the waters above the boundary of God's physical universe? And then we have the heaven of heavens that Paul was caught up to. There's ideas about that, but nothing solid. So the Bible actually doesn't support a vapor canopy in the atmosphere. And King David writes in the Psalms, "Praise him, ye heavens, praise him, ye waters above the heavens." The waters above the heavens were still there at the time of King David. They were not precipitated at the time of the flood. So there's the biblical support for a vapor canopy just isn't there. And then it's not needed to explain the greenhouse effect and people living to 1,000 years. Let's do people living to 1,000 years. A greenhouse effect you can get from more CO2. We all know that now. The media tells us that. And in the plant, okay, we'll do the greenhouse effect first, and then talk about people living for thousands of years, for hundreds of years. Let me get my units right. There's good evidence in the plant fossils that were buried at the time of Noah's flood. See, plants need CO2 for photosynthesis. There's good evidence in the plant fossils for 10 to 15 times the amount of CO2 that we have now. That would produce a beautiful greenhouse effect, and with the added benefit of much more lush vegetation. There's greenhouses now, like down in Leamington, where they grow the tomatoes and stuff that we have all winter, and other greenhouses. What gas do they pump into the greenhouses? Most of you know, right? CO2. Why? It's not a pollutant, as Government of Canada radio ads tell us that it's not a pollutant, it's good for plants. If we don't have CO2 in the atmosphere, we'll die. But anyway, so great evidence for CO2, that would produce a greenhouse effect. Don't need a vapor canopy for that. Now, what about people living to 900, maybe people lived over 1,000 years? The oldest recorded living individuals, Methuselah, 969 years. Remember Dolly, the first successfully cloned animal? She was a sheep. Remember that? That's a long time ago now. Dolly aged and died very quickly, and there was a major breakthrough in the science of aging, how we age and why we die, that was made at that time. Dolly, they actually had to put her down because she got diseases common in much older sheep. There's things on the ends of our genes called telomeres, on the ends of our chromosomes called telomeres, and it's the same information over and over again. And again, that's when this discovery was made. Every time there's cell division, you lose a little bit of the telomere, it gets cut off. And the current state of science, that's a problem, but cells can survive, but eventually that's gone, and you start cutting into the coding bits of DNA that code for the amino acids that make the structures of our body. Now, and then so cells don't reproduce themselves with 100% accuracy at that point. And that's happening in all of our cells, like we all have mutations and so on, and telomeres are shrinking. And with Dolly, the reason she aged so quickly is because they used adult cells to clone Dolly, cells that already had shortened telomeres. They were closer to their expiration date, if you want to think of it that way. That was a major discovery back in the 80s or something. Aging, and so the answer to how people lived so long before the flood is not environmental. It wasn't because of the environment. Shield out harmful radiation, that kind of thing. You can do that, and eat healthy food and exercise, and you'll by changing your environment, you'll extend your life a little bit, but you're not going to get to 1,000 years by changing your environment. It's genetic. We're basically programmed to die. And so the answer to how people lived that long before the flood is genetic. They had longer telomeres. There was fewer mutations in general. There's thousands of mutations that all of us have. By the time you're 15, the average cell in your body, I don't know if we have any 15-year-olds here. You're 15? The average cell in your body has 6,000 mutations. We're all mutants. The average skin cell in a 60-year-old has 40,000 mutations. And no amount of oil of delay is going to stop that either, right? And the same thing's happening with all your vital organs, your liver and your kidneys and your heart and everything. It's all going downhill because of mutations. And so that plays, it's genetic. It's genetic why we die. Environment, yeah, absolutely. Don't smoke and...
All right, I have to jump in here quick. Youth, some of you may have rides here, so go check if your parents are here to pick you up, just because we are past the time when they would come to get you. Yes. But then we'll continue doing Q&A. I just want to make sure there aren't any parents waiting out there. We do have a youth with a question. Can we jump over there?
Yeah. Where did Cain get his wife? That is a popular question. And rightly so, rightly so. People smirk and smile, and actually, I think all of you know the answer. I think all of you know the answer already, but you're hesitant to say what it is. But let me give you the wrong answer first. The wrong answer, and this was taught in some Bible colleges in the past. I hope it's not still taught today, but here's the wrong answer. So the Bible says Adam and Eve had Cain, Abel, and Seth, 3 boys. And then it says Cain went to the land of Nod, wherever that was, and there he found a wife. Or he took his wife with him, in any case. And the answer, and this is wrong, that was given in the past, I hope it's still not given today, is those people living in the land of Nod, they're not descendants of Adam and Eve. That was the answer. And then they would go on to teach their missionaries in training. They would teach them, oh, don't bother going to that tribe over there. They're not descendants of Adam and Eve. They can't be saved. Because if you're not a descendant of Adam and Eve, you haven't inherited the sin nature, so do you need a savior? Like, what's going on there? But that's the wrong answer, okay? What's the right answer? You put 2 verses in the Bible together and it points you in the right direction. Genesis 3 verse 20 says, it says, Eve was the mother of all living. Adam named his wife Eve because she would be the mother of all living. So everybody who's ever lived on planet Earth has Eve as their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Okay? Genesis 3, verse 20. Genesis 5, verse 4 says Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters. Other sons and daughters. So again, I think most of you know the answer. Cain would have married his sister, yes. But we're hesitant to say that because, ew, right? Now, there's objection. And skeptics, Bible haters have a field day with this one because they think, well, no, that can't be the answer because if brother and sister married, we'd all be insane by now, right? You get mutations in your kids. It's not good for your kids. So that's a biological objection, genetic objection. And then there's a moral objection. People say, well, isn't that incest? That's just wrong. So there's a moral objection and there's a biological objection. Let's deal with the biological objection. Now, we need to back up a little bit. When you get married, if you're planning on getting married one day, you will marry one of your relatives. Right? Think biblically. If we all go back, you go back far enough, you get back past the Tower of Babel, back to Noah and originally Adam and Eve. So you will marry one of your relatives. If you're married today and you haven't married one of your relatives, you've married something that isn't human. Okay? Now look straight at me. Don't look at your spouse because you're going to get in trouble. Just to clarify, you have to marry one of your relatives. So let's refine the question. Why can't you marry someone you're closely related to? Right? You have to marry someone you're related to. Why can't you? What's the biological problem with marrying someone you're closely related to? And again, it's mutations. We talked about mutations already. If you marry someone you're closely related to, chances are they'll have the same mutation at the same location, hence you get a problem with your kids. So marry someone further away in relation to you. Hopefully their good information will overwrite your bad, and vice versa, and you'll have healthy kids. So this is because of mutations today. You can't do this. If we go back in time, were there more mutations or fewer in the human population? There's fewer, right? And we can go back and back and back in time until there's no mutations. So originally, it wasn't a biological problem for close relatives to marry. That's the first question dealt with. Now, what about the second one? People say, well, it's just wrong. And they use the word incest. People throw out this word incest. But when you use that word, it implies an abusive relationship. There's something wrong with a relationship. If it's one man for one woman for life, that's marriage. And initially, it had to be close relations marrying anyways. It wasn't abusive. It wasn't incest, because incest implies an abusive relationship. There's something wrong with it. So it's not incest. Yes, it's close relatives marrying. Wasn't a biological problem, and if it's one man for one woman for life, that's marriage. Even a long time after creation, Abraham marries Sarah, and Sarah is his half-sister. Yeah, and it wasn't wrong at that point for Abraham to marry Sarah. Now, it's wrong today. Does anybody know when the law against close intermarriage came? When did that come? The time of Moses. The Levitical law. Now you shall no longer approach your close relation, right? It's God who sets the rules, not us. And so it's morally wrong now because you're breaking God's law now, but before God made the law, no, it wasn't morally wrong, and it wasn't a biological problem either. So there we go. So short question, long answer. Anyways, Pastor James, just cut me off.
We can do one more, and then okay. You have to go up and ask him in person after. So you don't have to stop. You can go hunt Richard down after.
Okay. 13. I almost need my glasses here. How did animals get to places like Australia after the flood? Yes, and that combines kind of with number 10. Was there an ice age? Those questions work together. Yes, there was an ice age. It happened right after the flood. The flood is a great trigger for getting an ice age going. And what you need to get an ice age is you need more evaporation from the oceans and cooler continents. And after the flood, there would have been warmer oceans. You've got continents moving apart. massive volcanoes, earthquakes, and that kind of thing. A huge amount of heat. So where the continents originally ripped apart, you've got essentially close to molten rock coming from near the core of the earth, forming new ocean floor. So no Atlantic Ocean before the flood. That happened rapidly. So lots of heat generated in the oceans during the flood. So right after the flood, the ocean water will be a lot warmer than it is today. So you get more evaporation. Hotter water evaporates more readily than colder water. And because of the flood, there's volcanism, volcanoes, on a scale that maybe we can't even imagine, spewing huge amounts of dust and pollutants into the atmosphere, shielding out the sun's energy, making the continents cooler. You need cooler summers, and you need that precipitation from the oceans to be snow in the higher latitudes. An ice age doesn't mean that the whole Earth is covered with ice. Just further north and further south, the ice sheets grow, and we're talking about, like over this area of Canada, kilometers thick ice sheets, a massive amount of ice. So that because of the volcanic dust, the summers are cooler, so the snow from the winter doesn't completely melt every year, and it builds up and builds up and builds up year after year, producing an ice age starting right after the flood, going for about 700 years or so. It's what the models seem to suggest, peaking at maybe 500 years. After a number of centuries, eventually the Earth is going to slow down, the ocean temperature is going to go down, evaporation is going to slow down, and the volcanoes are eventually going to be lessened as well, and the pollutants will be pulled out of the atmosphere, and the summers are warmer, and you have glaciers melting back for a couple hundred years. Now, taking that huge amount of water out of the oceans and storing it on land in the form of ice sheets will lower ocean levels to the point where all of the continents, including Australia, are connected by land bridges. So one of the answers to how animals got to places like Australia, the kangaroo gets off the ark in the Middle East after the flood, and it doesn't swim, well, how to get to Australia? There's kangaroo fossils in most places around the world, even South America. So there's been kangaroos around, but after the flood, ocean levels are lowered, and the answer to how the kangaroo could have got to Australia after the flood might be as simple as it hopped. Now, we're not suggesting that a single kangaroo made the entire distance, but as the population of kangaroos grew and spread out, some of them made their way to Australia. And then after this is another plausible idea, after the Ice Age ends, Australia is now an island nation. It's cut off from the rest of the world. And even today in Australia, the kangaroo has no natural predator. It's a pest. The farmers hate them. They erect their fences, and we think they're cute, but the Australians hate them. I had kangaroo jerky when I was there. They just, but anyway. So it tastes like chicken. Yeah, so does everything. But so even today, the kangaroo has no natural predator. So it may be that the predators that would be like lions and tigers and packs of coyotes and wolves or whatever, they were cut off at the end of the Ice Age, and that's the only reason why kangaroos are not extinct in Australia today, where they were wiped out everywhere else. So there's some possibilities there for, again, thinking from a biblical perspective, and then just doing the science. If there was a global flood, well, look at this, look at this, look at this. What are the consequences of that? And we can think about, then we can answer questions like this. Think about the consequences of the flood. Well, there was an ice age, great trigger for an ice age, and off we go with answering questions like this. So, all right. Okay, I know there was a lot of other hands up. Creation.com is where you want to go to get answers for those things. Or if I haven't answered the question to your satisfaction, creation.com is where you can go. There's only so much I can recall out of my head. But anyways, thank you for attending. It's such a beautiful day today, beautiful spring day. And the bottom line is, the Bible's true. And as we look at the world around us, it supports the biblical text. Without fancy interpretation, just read the Bible in the way that it's written, and not poetry. It's written as history. Just take it as history. If you just take the Bible, it fits with the world around us. So,
thank you, Richard. Let's give him a hand.